Today, we're going to be talking about unit economics versus growth. We've got David Lannon here. David, I'll let him introduce himself, but David formerly worked at Whole Foods as the EVP of operations. He reported directly to the CEO, and then he's an advisor here at Dirty Hands. So I've had the chance to work very closely with David over the past couple of years here through our growth. So, as we've started to do some webinar sessions to bring the community together, get some good information out there, David and I thought this would be a great topic to dive right into. So again, today is going to be unit economics versus growth. I know it's a big item on everybody's mind right now. And yeah, before we get started, David, can you introduce yourself, maybe a little bit about your background and then what you're doing now?
Hey, everybody, this is David Lannon. Thanks, Dan. So I worked at Whole Foods for a very long time. I started with Bread and Circus in Boston. I was a produce team member, produce team leader, store team leader, led operations. And then when Whole Foods acquired the company, I worked for Whole Foods in California as a store team leader, and then eventually vice president and president. I ran the Northern California region, the Northeast and the North Atlantic, which was London, Boston, New York. And then for my last 7 years at Whole Foods, I was EVP of operations. I was in the C-suite, worked with John Mackey and Walter Robb and a lot of the executive team there, and led operations throughout the company. Worked very closely with purchasing, worked with marketing, brands, stores, store design, all that kind of stuff. So, long history with Whole Foods Market. And then 2 years after Amazon acquired the company, I left the company, retired from Whole Foods Market, and then did a startup cannabis business in Oregon, founded that company called Tumalo, and they're still going strong up there in Oregon. And then I currently, I'm on the board of directors of Dirty Hands, great company, ever heard of it? And then also advise and on the board of directors of a company called Garden Remedies, cannabis company out of Massachusetts, which was one of the very first medical dispensaries to actually open in the state of Massachusetts. So still working and friendly with cannabis and natural food brands, and kind of in the heart of Sonoma County where I live, and excited to be here this morning.
Awesome. Thanks, David. And I know you've got a ton of experience there, as you mentioned. You don't need to admit it, but we do know that your time with Dirty Hands has probably been your favorite experience. So
absolutely. Of course.
100%. So we're going to just jump right in and get started, pull off the PowerPoint. So unit economics, I think it's a hot topic. It's one that has a lot of different factors headed into it. But when I think about unit economics, it's really your financial engine, right? It determines kind of your revenue and your profit as you grow. And really, it's something on the forefront of every brand's mind, especially now as we're headed into a tougher time and profitability becomes something that's critical. So, David, the first question I have for you is, why are unit economics so important to get right early?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in this, from all my experience. The old, joke you hear is, we lose a little money on every customer and we make it up on volume, and it's like, that doesn't work. You actually need to figure out how to make sure that whatever your unit is, whether it's a store, whether it's an individual product or a service, that in and of itself, each one of those building blocks makes money. And if they make money, ultimately your success of either retaining and owning your business or selling your business, all those things start to work when you actually get down to making sure you understand, the little things add up to the big things, and the little thing and the basic unit is the unit of economics. So just to be sure everybody's clear. So, essentially it's the price, whatever price you'd set to sell your products minus your variable costs. And variable costs are things like ingredients, packaging, things like that, delivery, that becomes your contribution margin, or i.e. your unit cost. I would also argue that absolute numbers really matter, meaning the true bottom line, after all of your expenses, including your fixed cost. Are you making money? So, in my mind, you almost take your price that you're setting per unit and minus out all your costs. And then allocate all your costs against that unit. And if you're still making money on the unit basis, you're going to make money on the bigger basis.
Yeah, 100%. There's actually been a ton of confusion on this space. We're going to get into it a little bit kind of down the path here, but around trade spend as well, and where that factors into unit economics. So, we'll talk about that in a second here. But, when you think about short-term versus long-term and how unit economics affects that, a lot of what we hear is brands just trying to get into it, right? A lot of founders just want to get selling. And so units aren't necessarily optimized early on, with the expectation that, hey, as we grow, we can figure it out, right? Do you think that's true? Or what are the risks of kind of approaching it that way?
Well, I think it never was really true. And in the era of free money kind of being over now, it's really not true. I mean, when Mark Zuckerberg's talking about frugality, it's, everybody's talking about frugality. So, I mean, ultimately, you need to, positive unit economics means your business is working. So I think, starting from day one, like, what is your manufacturing cost? What does it cost to make your product? Are you going through all the steps? And then people can get trapped in like, well, my gross margin is this, and it's like, well, what's your bottom line margin? Or, it's like, I have this chart in my deck and it shows this hockey stick growth. And at this magic point, we might make money, or somebody's going to buy us. And it's like, I mean, that could happen. You could be the unicorn that it happens to, but if each product is making money in and of itself, then ultimately you've got a more powerful story to tell investors, or just, to sleep at night knowing that that your company is making money.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Especially like you said, with the free money being over, it's brands either need to get to profitability or have some sort of compelling story to tell investors. And I think that the trap is, hey, let's just get going and let's get selling. Which again, you could do that in the past, because if you had a strong top line, you could raise money pretty quickly, pretty easily too. But now it's not as easy, right? And so when investors are taking harder looks at these brands and they see the units not lining up or not being scalable, it's really tough to get that money from them. And I think the other side of that is, with retailers and distributors, once you set your price, it's not as easy as just changing it. It does take time for you to work through that with retailers and distributors. And that does affect your relationship as well if you continuously try to change things. So,
I mean, a big lesson I learned from John Mackey was, about real estate when we opened stores. So if you think about a store as an individual economic unit, at Whole Foods, in Whole Foods in its heyday, pre-merger, we carefully evaluated every single store, and in and of itself, was that store profitable? So there was always the urge of like, oh, we need to be in that market first, or, oh, we need to make sure we get our market share, or we need to have a store north and south and east and west in this market. It's like, no, each individual store needs to make money. And if each individual store makes money, then ultimately the company makes money. And I think that's a strong discipline that's easy to get away from. So I think it's important to be careful about that. I mean, the classic examples, of course, are all the food delivery companies that kind of started up, or the meal kit companies. I think I met with every single meal kit company when I was with Whole Foods, and they all lost a lot of money, and they were all set up to lose a lot of money from the very first product. And there was no end in sight for profitability. So it's, for a lot of those companies. So a lot of the food delivery companies got either acquired or went out of business. And again, when it's not subsidized by the free money of, super low interest rates that essentially can partially pay for the delivery, when that goes away, you've seen all these services, and including like your Netflix and everything else, all the prices have gone up because the money's not free anymore. So, but if you start from a position of each of my unit makes money, then whatever the economy goes up and down, you're in a position of strength. So,
right. No, that's a great point. I think a lot of brands or founders, not everybody is kind of a financial expert or has that acumen in that space. Where do brands start if they don't have this figured out? How do smaller brands need to approach this?
Honestly, I think pencil and paper of like, are you truly tracking the costs of your ingredients? Are you, are you working closely with your co-packer? Do you approve all kind of ingredient changes, things like that? Do you need the fancy new packaging? Do you need to redo your packaging every 2 years? Does it make sense? Is it smarter to do a line extension versus, say, creating a whole new product? What are the activities that really grow sales? When you're a startup and are new, it's like, I always think of the more important things are things like demos and, getting in the store and making sure your product's merchandised and making sure you have multiple locations where your products are merchandised, making sure everybody who works in the stores have tried your product. Instead of like, hey, we need to create this whole social media strategy and we need to pay for influencers. And, essentially you don't have enough market share to make some of those bigger activities really pay off.
Sure.
It's like advertising on a national level. If your product's not national, why you're doing it? Even then, why are you doing it? So kind of thinking about, your limited resources, that each unit is economically viable and that you're, keeping your nose down and making sure your current customers are really happy and trying to expand volume within those current customers. You can easily, as a founder, you want to say yes. It's like to the one store in Seattle and you're based in North Carolina and you're like, yes, I'll ship it out. We'll figure it out. And you're losing your shirt on it. And it's just not, better to be great where you are,
Yeah,
And
100%.
yeah. Some of the examples I look at all the time are like, the classic examples are like Trader Joe's or In-N-Out Burger, where they just stayed in California for a long, long time. And they got pulled into other states because they were so successful where they were. So
yeah, I think it's allowing you to proactively run your business or reacting as you make decisions, right?
yeah.
To your point. And as you're in a smaller territory, it allows you to really have control over your costs until you really figure it out and then scale up. So I think that's a great point. You mentioned something that I think is important. I'd like to share an experience with Dirty Hands too. You said pen and paper, right? I think again, units have been challenging because it seems on the surface like it might be complex, but at the end of the day, you don't need to get down to like 100% precision. You need to ultimately do your best to track your expenses, right? Go out, figure out your costs from your providers, go figure out, what your trade spend's going to look like. But a lot of small brands might not have the data that they feel they need or the precision. You don't need that, right? And Dirty Hands, for example, early on, we never had funding ourselves. And when I came into the business, we didn't have really financial statements. We didn't have robust data.
Right.
So I just personally grabbed an Excel spreadsheet and just, these are the costs, right? Headcount, insurance, software, right? And I didn't have the data to say these were precise, but if you get it into about 99 or 90, even 95%, you have enough to make good decisions. So, to David's point, my advice to brands would be don't let it intimidate you. Grab a pen and paper and just start writing. There's also a ton of, if you go on any of the, industry sites or even on Google, there's a ton of calculators out there that can get you started. So if anybody needs those, you can, reach out to us and we'll send you some.
Yeah, it was interesting. I know when Amazon purchased Whole Foods, I worked in operations for a couple of years. It was like, we were battling out of stocks in the store and Amazon, I was ready for this magic tech system that Amazon had and they were like, nope, let's start with clipboards and paper in every department, and every time something out of stock, you put a check mark next to it. It's like,
right.
And they did that in other parts of their business too. It's like, I'm older, but I also feel like I understand things better if I actually put pen to paper and actually really think it through and put all my pieces related to that.
Absolutely.
And then the business I've been, the cannabis business is, it's the most extreme example of unit economics. I mean, people built their businesses on cannabis flower being $4,000 a pound. And then in certain markets, it's down less than $1,000 a pound or less than $500 a pound. So it's like, the market massively reacted to oversupply. And it's like, can you still be profitable? And it's like, it's definitely like, it's like getting through the eye of the needle. But that's like the most extreme example I can think of, like, where you're the price that you could charge for your product, has dipped 6, 7, 800% in the last couple of years. And it's like the true, the people that are going to survive that in the cannabis industry are the ones that have that super strong unit economics and make sure to not stray from that. So.
Right. And to your point that they have the understanding of what goes into them, so they know what levers to pull as the economy, the market, the pricing changes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, a simple thing, but a lot of companies don't audit every single expense every year. So they just let contracts continue, and be like, okay, we like those people that can provide the same product, but maybe your sales have gone up. Maybe you're a bigger company now, so you should demand a better cost on that product, or you essentially audit, and then essentially almost every single part of your business that you have a service or you're acquiring something from others should be bid out every single year. That's a discipline that, frankly, I know even my time at Whole Foods, there were parts of the business we wouldn't do that. And then, that's increasing the cost of your products when, that could essentially improve. So if you focus on the unit economics, auditing and bidding on a process every single year, you're on the road to profitability. So.
Absolutely. And you're getting into kind of the next question I was going to ask you, which is, as brands scale up, how can they find leverage in the units? So obviously, out looking at their costs, auditing it, finding ways to kind of be more efficient. Are there other things brands can do as they kind of get to scale to improve their economics?
Yeah, I mean, I think also asking the retailers, how can we both benefit, and make it a bit smoother through the system, I think, like, are you an expensive brand to work with? Is your distributor work smoothly with the company? Versus self-distribution versus, all those kind of things. It's like, how do you kind of take that out of the system? And then, really thinking through, as you scale up, what truly is your trade spend. I think we're going to talk about that, but what's your trade spend and how are you allocating that? Is that really effective for your sales and your products? And then again, as you can get giddy with the growth and, like, again, let's make a bunch of new products, or people, everybody's got an opinion about your product if you're successful or growing. And it's like, why don't you do this? Why don't you make this product? And it's like, well, I think of, like, natural food legends. It's like, Dr. Bronner's or Bragg's amino acids. It's like, it's on the shelf. It's on the shelf in every store. It's rarely on sale, and it's just, but it's always on the shelf. It's a supermarket classic. I mean, and that's kind of what I think a lot of people should try to aspire to be, is to be that supermarket classic.
Absolutely. And to get into trade spend, I think that's probably one of the biggest questions I get around units is, how do you factor in trade spend? Obviously, if you're a brand and you're attacking retail, you need to understand you're going to have trade spend, right? And you need to have buffer there to make sure you have enough. So how would you personally factor in trade spend into your units?
Well, one thing I would say is your salespeople is making sure that you've got a good process where they can, I know Garden Remedies, who I work with their sales team, they have a, real simple calculator of, like, how much they can offer on discount before they run into below the cost. So they can't go there. It's got to be, it's got to really make it that the cost is, they can't trade below that. So in order getting those salespeople to do that as well. And then also making sure that your promos, what is your promo cycle schedule? How often do you want to promote your product? How often do the brands want to promote your product? Oh, we need to promote every, once a month. It's like, well, then that could really eat into your economics. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of again, I mentioned it earlier, one of the big misconceptions that I think brands find themselves getting caught off guard by is how you even calculate your gross margins here. There's sometimes the misconception that you're doing that on gross revenue when you should probably be looking at net sales, right? And then you have to understand that, you're easily getting to 15 to 20% in trade spend as you look at promotions,
Mhm.
things like that. But then there's chargebacks and, OIs and all these other things that maybe you
Mhm.
didn't anticipate. So I think getting the calculation correct to begin with is important.
Yeah.
You don't get surprised down the line. At least that's what I've seen a lot of.
Yeah, it's like, here's the price per unit that we can sell it at, and then you just start minusing all those things and figuring out if it makes sense. And again, it's like if a retail partner is asking too much, you can say no. I mean, it can be, like, we're just going to kill it in these 500 doors rather than lose money at 1,000 doors, So, again, incremental growth, slow and steady, tortoise wins the race. I think that's a healthy approach. I mean, you always got to start with a great product, but if you have a great product and you have financial disciplines, that's how you're going to make it and not disappear off the shelves in
Can
short
you
order. So,
Can you expand on that a little bit? You've mentioned that a couple of times just around, being disciplined, not necessarily
mhm.
going after crazy spends that maybe you can't quantify. Like what are some of the things that you're referring to when you say having financial discipline?
Well, I think the biggest thing is kind of over expanding outside of your reach. So it's like we make a product and we have a co-packer in Southern California, and we need to, somebody said, hey, we want to carry your brand in Florida, and you don't have a co-packer, and you're going to pay through the nose to figure out how to do it, or or you're shipping it, across the country yourselves just to get in that store. It's like it feels like an opportunity, but it also is, maybe it's an opportunity to wait and get a little bit bigger in wherever your core is, and also where you physically are. I think people often underestimate things that are out of your own line of sight. Um, if you don't have a direct line of sight to the stores where your product is, the manufacturing process, your sales team. I mean, of course, brands have built up and have been able to do it, and they have investors or they get additional resources. But in the beginning, staying pretty disciplined about that is important. So,
Absolutely. And when you think about the economy, we touched on that a little bit with it being tougher
mhm,
to raise money, and so units and profitability and cash flow is more important. How
mhm.
how has the economy changed? Kind of your thoughts on unit economics, and what would you recommend to brands as we're in just a little bit of a tougher time here?
Well, I think every investor has flipped the switch. I mean, I think the idea that you're going to grow your way out of it is just kind of stopped. Very hard to raise money now, but if you are profitable on a unit economic level, your shot at getting investors is stronger than not. I mean, I think that those days are kind of over for now. So I think staying focused on your core products and your core disciplines is the thing that makes the most sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is also an opportunity for brands to really look at their business models and
Mhm.
make some hard decisions. I know
Yeah,
a lot of people want to do that, but if you look at your retailers and you look at your SKUs, there's really an opportunity to rationalize both of
yeah,
those things to make sure again that you understand not just the unit economics of your products, but of your retailers. As well, right? Are these things working for you or working against you in terms of cash and making some tough
correct.
decisions there?
Absolutely, 100%. So I think it's like, if you can figure out the discipline process, understanding that, absolute numbers do matter, that you're really focusing on that discipline of the products. And if you start that as the core of your business from the beginning, it's kind of like running it like you own it. And again, going back to the supermarket analogy in Whole Foods is, Whole Foods at its peak was, each team was empowered to run as its own team. So the idea of like, hey, we can lose money over here, but we'll make it up over here. It's like, no, each part of the store needs to make money in and of itself. So, and if it's not, really evaluating and going in deep. Um, and if you got a product in your lineup, I mean, if there's a product in your lineup that's just like, hey, we're keeping it around, we don't want to drop it, we have some inventory, we have two customers that really want it, but it doesn't make money. It's like, be a little ruthless, kill off, you got to kill off some of you're like, hey, I created this product, I love it. And it's like, well, It's great that you and two of your friends love it, but do 10,000 people love it. So being pretty ruthless about that kind of stuff
Right.
is just smart business. So
That's the hard part, but no, I think you're right. So we're going to open this up to Q&A in just a second here, guys. So I'm going to give you a heads up. You can see that on the bottom. There's a little Q&A section. So David, one more question before we kind of open it up to the crew here. Just what advice would you leave folks listening today about their unit economics, especially looking at the next 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, studying companies that are doing well with it, I think makes a lot of sense. Here, like for example, where I live in Sebastopol, I'm a big fan of Bachan's, the Japanese barbecue sauce. I think Justin Gill, they really started small, farmers markets and local markets like Oliver's, and they built up a business through quality ingredients, family recipe, and then you go to their office. It's a little tiny storefront here in Sebastopol, nothing fancy, very tight little team. But now they're growing significantly. They're in Costco and Whole Foods and all other places. They just recently raised a bunch of money to keep growing, and it feels like there's examples out there of people doing it right. And make sure you're expanding your network and like finding the winners and the things that are successful. And then study, getting, talking to other people, getting online, figure out what's working. I like this. It's just one YouTube video I'd recommend by these two guys they're called the Margin Medics, and it's like 20 minutes, and they're really good at just kind of, spelling out some of this stuff. So, and then just don't be intimidated. In the end of the day, it's still relatively simple. It's like, can you make more money? Can you put it at a price that makes more money that costs you to make the product? I mean, that's really, and all the other numbers feed into that basic concept. And don't let investment people or other things kind of make you think it's a lot more complicated than that. If you keep it pretty simple like that in your mind's eye, ultimately lead to success.
Absolutely. Now, I would echo that. And, a couple of other piece of advice I would give is, again, to David's point, be relentless about understanding your units now. If you don't, like now is the time to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of articles out there. There's tons of calculators. David, to your point, I have not heard of Margin Medics, but maybe we'll pull together our resources and send those out to the group that joined today. And I would say the other thing is just, again, take a hard look today at understanding your lines that you have, the SKUs that you have at the retailers that you're working with, and really rationalize those. I think at this point in time, if you want to be somebody that sticks out in your next pitch, if you're fundraising, you're going to want to have good economics. A lot of brands are having difficulty doing that because investors just can't rationalize giving money to somebody who's kind of losing money on every unit. So spend time to understand that.
Yeah, if you're in a position where you have to make that elevator pitch, I'd much rather say I have strong unit economics than I have strong EBITDA, for example. I'd much rather say I have strong unit economics, because that covers EBITDA. It covers all those things. That it covers all those other measurements in an even stronger way.
Definitely. All right, guys. So we're going to open this up to the Q&A. We got a couple of questions in here now, but just keep rolling them in as we go. So, David, the first question is: can you discuss competing against the growing private label landscape and building a brand while also doing private label projects?
Yeah, it is a challenge. I think the thing is ultimately, most companies, most of their private label is the value position in the market. So I guess the thing is like, it's tough to be in the value position if they're kind of essentially knocking off branded products. So I think it's like, trying to be more middle tier or top tier. Stores still need to carry all the variety of, they got to carry other things besides the private label. But if you get the opportunity to do the private label for a product, it is interesting. It should be a little bit easier to understand unit economics, because most of the time, if you get to be a private label for somebody, you're not you're not subject to much trade spend. You're not subject to promotional, those kind of things. I think one thing I would say, for all kind of specialty markets and natural food markets, the COVID has kind of killed off a lot of the bars and the kind of fancy spaces in the store. And I think, from what I'm hearing, everybody's, putting in a lot more grocery shelving, freezer, refrigerated space. So I think the design thing is starting to change, which would hopefully free up more space to carry more brands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made a good point. Now is not necessarily the time to try to compete on price against private label, just straight up with the value proposition. I think brands that do offer a premium tier, a good thing to do to kind of compete with private label is a promotional schedule, is getting heavy on that, and figuring out how you can offer some price propositions to your customers. But if you're trying to go the value route, it's tough to compete with private label right now.
Yeah.
Cool. So the second question we have here is, what determines whether a brand is ready to go global or not? Does it make sense to go region by region? Is it the uniqueness of the product? Is it, achieving top velocities? So a lot of questions there, but ultimately, what's going to determine if a brand's ready to go global? David, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's specifically related to Whole Foods. Again, I don't work for Whole Foods anymore, and haven't for a few years. So, I guess the thing I would say is like, to me, it's like just killing it in a region. And again, you'll be pulled into global if your units per store are doing great, if customers love it, if people look at the data or go and visit that region and see how well that product does. I mean, it's like the units that people are like, how do I get into global? It's like, have a great product that sells a lot in a region, and you won't have to do very much to go global. So I think that's a thing. That's a thing of like, I would lean into just maximizing the sales per store, a unit. And if you have eye-popping numbers in that region, then you'll be pulled into global or pulled into multiple region, as opposed to, hey, put me in every store in the company. And even though my sales are not that strong yet. So again, patience. And then, I think, there's bigger stores, there's bigger, if you're in the Northeast region of Whole Foods with all those New York City stores, it's like, you're probably selling enough products. You don't really have to be anywhere else. So, anyways, trying to think like that, like not spending all your time trying to figure out how to go global, just maximizing the sales in the regions you're in, and you'll get pulled to global. So that's just my opinion. Again, I don't work at Whole Foods anymore.
Right. And I want to expand on that, David, because you said something earlier that I think was important, that this question may also be asking, which is, sometimes brands will get an opportunity to go national with a retailer, right? They may get an offer from, a Whole Foods Global to blow out all regions, or a Target to go into mass regions. How does a brand know that they're ready to handle that, to your point, financially? Are there any things you're looking at?
Yeah, because I mean, if you are truly ready, that's awesome. But it's like, and the thing you don't want to do is say yes, and then all of a sudden you have out of stocks everywhere because you really haven't figured out your manufacturing process, or you really can't trade up to the volume. So, I mean, I would much rather go this region than that region, than half the country, and then kind of work your way up. I mean, it can. Some types of products can do it, maybe the manufacturing process is easier. Maybe it's just shelf stable product. There's probably examples that people have won where it's easier, but it's like, you'd hate, you only get one shot at that. So if you do it and all of a sudden you have out of stocks and wonkiness, that's not great. So, and then you're off the shelf, and then you're probably never back on. So.
Yeah, it's you have a shot there. If you say yes, you've got to make it happen, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're in, if you're in 100 stores doing X volume and you're in 1,000 stores doing the same volume, it's like, I would much rather be in 100 stores doing that volume. It's easier to control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we talked about that a little bit on the last webinar we put together, which was, again, if at this point in time, it's better, to your point, to be in a smaller set of retailers that you're profitable in, that you can invest in, that you can keep your velocities up.
Yeah,
Because it's easier then to show a sales story to other retailers and other investors than it is to be in a lot of places losing money.
yeah,
Just important to think
exactly.
about.
Cool.
David, another question here is we've got somebody who is planning to raise a seed round after doing a private launch. So it's a limited online and limited retail New York City. Their goal is to show investors that people like the products and are going to repeat purchase it. The question is, how else do we wow investors with a launch like that?
Well, super simple things. Is the product delicious? Getting them, assuming it's a food product, it could be another type of product, but if it's a food product, getting it in the mouths of the potential investors. I think the individual sales per store, like if you're just in a few stores, but if you're popping some, if you actually have a product in the market in stores, that's a big step, starting from scratch and trying to introduce it, trying to get investors before you've got it in some markets is challenging. So, how many units per day are you selling? How does that compare to other products in your category? Things like that, I think are super important. And then I think, if you like the areas we talked about of unit economics, if you can focus on like, hey, if these people give us a lot of money, we're going to be a good steward of that capital. We have a frugal mentality in general. We're going to, we know exactly how we're going to spend it. And the spend is going to be on improving the quality of the product, improving the experience in the stores, using it for appropriate trade spend. But you've got a real good plan of how you're going to make that grow your product or your company. So
well said. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got another question here about, this person is looking to find angel investors in the $500K to $2 million raise range. Do you have any recommended resources on how to find investors in that range?
There's definitely angel networks you can look into. It doesn't take very long to kind of look at that. I guess the thing would be is like looking at what your company is and the product they have or the volume you're at, and what are comparable companies and where did they get money from, and asking people. It's like, hey, how are they? How is that investment in terms of, how, is it somebody you want to deal with? Are they too much in your business? Do they provide support? Can they provide things that you can't afford to do in your company? So I think, asking other companies, who they've used, evaluating online the success stories and the companies that have invested. And then there's angel networks you can connect to online and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen some tools out there that just scrape the web of raises. To David's point, it's looking for raises in the CPG space. They're really cheap, like $10 a month. If you find who those investors are putting in money into brands kind of that are similar to you, just reaching out.
Or like if you find out, who those companies are, set up Google alerts and, and monitor and evaluate, and then decide when you're ready to make the ask. So.
Yeah. I also saw there was somebody out there, if they're listening, maybe they'll chime in, but somebody has created a database of investors in the space. So I'll try to find it and again, send it out post chat here. So the next question we have, David, we've got a couple more minutes here, so we'll keep going until we hit 1:45. But thoughts on demo spend? Tough to justify. But any thoughts on those?
I think demo is super important. I think there's lots of brands that over the years have like a sure way to get your products beloved by employees in stores or team members in stores is to get them to try the product. So usually when you're sampling for customers, you also get a chance to get people who work in the stores to try your products. And that in turn, there's nothing better than having employees be fans of your product. That's like the magic thing. It's like, if I was going to do any trade spend, getting people in the stores to try and love my product is the most important thing, and I think of that as kind of that's hustling. And it's like, to me, now that we can do it, now it's kind of, somewhat post COVID. If I was going to do any trade spend, I would do that first over a lot of other things. So
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the comment was tough to justify. I would say that is probably one of the best places you could put your money right now.
yeah,
Although again, it's hard to see it that way if you're in a lot of places and don't have great margins. I think that's why it's so important again to SKU rationalize and retailer rationalize, because if you can get back to strong cash flow or good units, then you can invest in things like demos. You can invest in things like merchandise. What are the things that are going to tangibly increase your
yeah,
velocity? That's what you want to be
yeah,
thinking about right now.
yeah. I mean, if a consumer's in the store and they're like, "Hey, which is the best chip here?" and the team member's like, "Well, I tried that one, and that's delicious. You should try that one." Those people are nice people. I like those people that run that company. I mean, it sounds like it should be more complicated, but there's lots of success stories that have kind of started that way.
Yeah. And demos, you also don't have to do it everywhere, right? Like look at the
Yeah.
80/20. What are the 20% of stores in the locations you're selling that drive 80% of your volume, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Start with those.
Yeah. And if you're new, it also gives you market research, you yourself being in the stores doing the demos. And it's like, oh, boy, everybody loves these two flavors, but this one really doesn't sell. I mean, you're going to get that immediate feedback that you're like, oh, I could do marketing panels and all this other kind of stuff. Just do demos. And if you're physically in the store or your team's in the store, especially at the early days, there's nothing better market research than those demos. So
Sure. So we've got another question here that says, what are your thoughts in the future of distribution, considering the considerable headwind costs with large distributors? Any insights there, David?
I think that's a whole nother seminar. I think that might be a whole nother webinar. Very tough. It's very tough. I guess the thing is like monitor and question everything. It's just, because you're getting chipped away all over the place. I'd love to see somebody start. I'd love to see somebody start a new business. I'd love to see some new distributors out there. So I know it's a hard business, but I'd love to see some more competition in that space. I think and there could be, because I think one of the things we learned is like, hey, the interweb and everybody will be flying cars and everybody will be shopping at home, and it's like, well, after COVID, almost everybody came back to shopping in stores.
Yeah.
Food, supermarket food, 80% they say is still steady. That's what gets bought in the stores versus online. So, and it hasn't really moved that much. It kind of moved during COVID, but then it moved back. So it's like it's still in the stores. So I feel like there's an opportunity for somebody to blow up the distribution and start a whole new distribution thing. So maybe one of our folks on the team,
whoever's listening,
that's a good
good business to disrupt.
Good business to disrupt. So
100%. All right, so we are going to close this out. By the way, before we do that, the database, whoever asked that question, is called FABID, FABID. That's a database that has some investors that's been consolidated. So thank you for the anonymous person who called that. Not anonymous, Alex Russell, I'll call you out. Thanks for doing that.
And I think my partner in consulting, Nick Papadopoulos, is on the call, and he does a lot. He's done a tremendous amount of gathering of potential investors. So he would also be a potential person to ping if you're looking for investor help. He's done a tremendous amount of research on the network, with Dirty Hands and with others. So
cool. We'll get Nick's information into the follow-up out of this call, so you guys can reach out. So before we go, just gotta plug DH Dirty Hands. Here's our information. Please follow us. We've got a great newsletter with information coming out. If you follow us, you're not going to miss these sessions. We've got another one in a couple of weeks with Bubniak, who's in the investing space. Dirty Hands, for anybody who doesn't know, we are sales, merchandising, brokering, your retail solutions provider, right? So anything that you need to really grow your brands at retail, just hit us up. We're here to help.
And the other thing, family-owned business, I mean, I love working with the family. It's like, it's a small group of folks. It's good folks that, kind of started in the food business. It's not some giant company. It's really there to service you as a brand, even a new brand. So I encourage you to reach out to them.
Awesome. Thanks for your time today, guys. Our information is here, both of our emails. If you have any questions, reach out. We will share the recording after this session, as well as some of the notes that David and I talked about. We'll consolidate some resources for you. But thank you again for your time, guys, and look forward to the next one with you. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Take care. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, David.